Thank you so much for joining us on the line. I have a lot of questions for you, but first, I just want to ask you about if you could give me a broad assessment of how things have shifted in Israeli society since you've been doing this work. How would you describe the change you're seeing in Israelis understanding them vis-a-vis Palestinians?
When I look backwards to my early years, there was a sense of innocence and ignorance, and we really loved ourselves. We were very proud about ourselves. We knew very little. As young people, I never heard the word Nakba. I never asked what are those ruins along the roads, who was living in those ruins, and nobody bothered to tell us. And we were really brought up in the sense that we are always the just one and the right one and the weak one, the David against the Goliath, the victims, they all want to kill us for nothing, and we just want peace. This accompanied me for many, many years, because this is what we were told. And only in my late 20s, I started to travel to the occupied territories and to realize that I was living in a big lie. Now, meanwhile, Israeli society changed as well, not as me, but there were major changes, because Israel lost its innocence. There was some sense of innocence. It lost totally its innocence. There was some hope, at least verbal, at least a lip service for ending the occupation, peace, the coexistence. All those years are gone now, and the big shift took place in the last year, ever since the 7th of October. This was the major shift after many years in which those processes became worse and worse. Israel went more and more to the right wing, to the racism, to the militarism, to the fundamentalism. But this last year had intensified all those tendencies, and now we really face a new society in which there is almost no opposition to major things like occupation, apartheid, war. There is full support in all those. Don't be wrong. I mean, there is a lot of resistance against Netanyahu, but not against the war, and not against the occupation, and not against the apartheid. And on the other hand, in this year, empathy toward the Palestinian became not only not legitimate, but many times even criminal. You can't pay any empathy toward the Palestinians, especially if you are an Israeli Palestinian. But even Jews, teachers were fired from their jobs because they just paid attention to the situation of the children of Gaza. So Israel is moving to a very bad place, and it's not like it started now, but it's getting worse. It's getting worse and worse.
Benjamin Netanyahu stood in front of the UN and said, "We are winning." When you speak to other Israelis, what does victory look like? What does that even mean?
They have a dream in which Hamas will disappear, Hezbollah will disappear, Iran will disappear, Israel will nominate the new leaders of Iran and the Palestinian people. They will all be Zionist Jews, and Israel will live in peace in the Middle East without having any enemies around them. This is more or less the level of their fantasy.
You've said that this is about more than just Netanyahu, and has very little to do with him. In trying to understand how Israelis reconcile this dichotomy, on the one hand, opposing a government they say is anti-democratic, but at the same time unbothered by this unending war against Palestinians, it's easy to say, well, they just don't care, or it's Zionist supremacy. But can it be that simple? Is there more to it?
It is quite simple, because you have to know the Israeli mindset. And it has some elements in it which are helping Israelis to become like this. Those elements include the deep belief that we are the chosen people, and therefore we have special rights. The deep belief that we are the victims of the Holocaust, and therefore we have the right almost for everything. And also a deep belief that the Palestinians are not exactly human beings, or at least not human beings like us. They don't love their children, they were born to kill, the only thing they want is to push us to the ocean. Now, if you have all this, plus the belief, which became much stronger in recent years, that the whole world is anti-Semitic, and the whole world is against us, which is exactly the opposite of the truth, by the way, because Israel is still the darling of the West, and Israel can do things that no other state in the world can do, because it is the darling of the West. But in any case, all this mindset, plus this deep belief that the Palestinians really are all terrorists and all want to kill us all the time. So if this is the situation, it's very easy to live in peace with 40,000 people being killed in Gaza, with another war in Lebanon. We have no other choice.
There's this English language Israeli messaging about Gaza. So the self-defense, getting the hostages back, the retaliation rather than aggression. But in Hebrew language clips, we see a very different kind of messaging, very aggressive, very bold in the rhetoric. But those days are long gone where language is just a major barrier. It seems like everyone lives everywhere and we have these translations at our fingertips, right? Everybody can translate stuff. Why do you think they're keeping up the softer English messaging?
I'm not sure they do. I mean, at least the real right-wingers don't do. I mean, if you talk to the real right-wingers, they are very clear in both languages. I think that the problem is what we are telling to ourselves. Still, there are Israelis who want to seem human and normal and moral. And for them, it's very hard to admit our real image, our real content. So this camp, which is usually called the Zionist left, they still want to feel good with themselves. And that's almost the only difference between them and the right-wingers. That they want to do everything softly, to do it but softly, and for sure to present it in a softer way. They will never call to burn villages like the right wing are singing now in the football games. Let's burn the villages. They will never call to burn the village out, but they will participate in burning villages in the army service without any hesitation. And now, after the 7th, they are much more convinced in themselves, because they are really thinking that the 7th of October was so terrible that it enabled Israel now to do whatever it wants. You know, each time you spoke about language, whenever you speak in Israel about the massacre, it's the 7th of October. 1,200, 1,400 people, innocent people. But 40,000 innocent people is not called a massacre. This is self-defense. It's very hard to fight it because it's very deep-rooted.
There's been a great deal also written about Israeli soldiers and social media and this constant posting of what they're doing, death, destruction, but in this sort of very lighthearted way of, oh, it's just another day at the office. How is it for you when you see these soldiers behaving this way and documenting it?
Well, it's not by chance that soldiers are usually 18, 19, 20 years old, and not 40, 45. I think physically you can do the same thing also at 40. But it's much easier to brainwash you when you are 18. And when I look backwards to my time as a soldier, I wasn't like this, but time changes. But what did I know and what did I take into consideration? You think I cared about life of Palestinians then? Not at all. So first of all, it is really the age, the brainwash. You cannot keep an occupation army without this brutality. It doesn't work. If you want to keep them servicing in an army which is basically an occupation army, not in times of war, but in the last 50 years, most of the activity of the army is governing in a brutal way another people. This is what they do most of the time. You can't have it without brutalizing the souls of those people and brainwash them that what they are doing is the right thing. You know, they all want a meaningful service in the army. And what is a meaningful service in the army? Usually it's beating, killing, and humiliating Palestinians. This is a meaningful service.
We do still see, there are people, I see clips of Israelis in the West Bank trying to defend Palestinians, trying to hold off settlers and the military. When you see these kinds of actions, I mean, given all of the things that are going on, does it give you any sense of hope?
No. Because those people who are really adorable, devoted, by the way, most of them are not young people. You can see the old people of 80 and even more. But they are also young people, obviously. They are adorable. But there are two problems. First of all, they are very small in figures, in numbers. And secondly, they are totally delegitimized in Israel. And therefore, they have no impact. What they do is good for them and good for the few shepherds that they succeed to save, or at least partially to save. But in terms of history, it is meaningless because they have no impact on the other Israelis who see them as traitors, and they are very small in numbers. By the end of the day, they are very, very small. They are also even ridiculized in the media as, lunatics. So with all the deep appreciation I have for those people, really on a personal basis, I don't think they make any difference except of feeling good that they still those people, which is wonderful. But historically, it's meaningless.
And what about the tens of thousands that we're seeing on the streets in Tel Aviv, in parts of Jerusalem? What are they out there for? Because there's a lot of mixed messaging.
No, the message is very clear. They want two things: to get rid of Netanyahu and to release the hostages. And only those two things.
Nothing to do with the Palestinians.
Nothing to do with Palestinians, and they will try to avoid any participation of those who call to end the occupation because they are afraid that this will put stains on their protest. So it's very depressing. Those people are, again, very good people, I must say, and very devoted. But it's not the right protest. Because getting rid of Netanyahu will not solve anything.
I was in the audience here in Toronto when you came to the Monk Center, and I want to ask you some questions about the diaspora. What impact do you think the Jewish diaspora is having on the way that this war, this genocide is being conducted?
Right now, I don't think they have a major impact directly because Israel has the full, total support of the United States. What else do we need? Full supply of weapons, full protection, full financing, full diplomatic support. Nevertheless, all the declarations of Biden and others, which are very touching, but totally hollow. So I don't think they have now, obviously, I guess they differ.
What were your impressions, though, of
very depressing. But
Yeah.
you see, it was a selective audience.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the conservative, rich Jews.
Yes,
And
it was
you would
expensive
see.
to get in. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
by definition, there is a self-selection there. I wasn't aware to it that when the tickets are so expensive, you can't expect everyone to be able to spend so much money. And it was very expected that this is not an audience that you can convince at all, because they are deep, deep in their blind Zionism.
I mean, when they booed Oxfam and all those other organizations, it was really quite telling. And I'm just wondering, when you were on that stage, were you at all surprised, or you weren't?
I was surprised because I didn't know what to expect. I came quite without knowing what to expect, and therefore I couldn't be surprised or disappointed, because I really didn't know what to expect. But the outcome was not good. I mean, it didn't make me happy or proud or satisfied. It was not one of the evenings that I will carry for the rest of my life. I won't be proud about it, not at all.
I want to go back to the start of the interview when I asked you to reflect on what you were seeing when you first started out and what things look like now. I want to ask you about journalism, the man that you are, the journalist you are. How did you see your role in those early days, and how has that changed all these years later?
It was a gradual process. I started quite incidentally. A friend, a member of the parliament, called me up and offered me to come with him to the West Bank because there is some old lady who claims that her olive trees were uprooted next to Nablus, I think it was. And we went there and we saw the uprooted olive trees. And I wrote a short report about it. And a few weeks later, there was something else in the West Bank. I went again. And it was gradually when I realized two things. First of all, that this is what defines Israel. The occupation defines Israel, not the front, not the facade democracy, but the backyard defines Israel. And secondly, I realized throughout the years, and now even more so, that there is almost no one to tell this story in Israeli media. Very, very few, and now much fewer. And gradually I decided that I'm going to dedicate my professional career to cover the occupation, not to cover the Palestinians. People are always wrong thinking that I'm covering the Palestinians. No, I'm covering the occupation. And I'm covering, in many ways, I'm covering Israel more than I'm covering the Palestinians. I cover what Israel is doing, not what the Palestinians are experiencing. I do it obviously throughout endless stories of the victims. But my aim is to tell the Israelis who they are, not who the Palestinians are. And therefore, I almost never met Palestinian politicians, and I have very little interest in the Palestinian politics, because finally I want to portray the occupation. In other words, to portray the dark side of Israel, and not the Palestinians.
How difficult is it for you? I mean, you're holding this mirror up to Israeli society. At what point did you sort of resign yourself to, okay, this is my role? A lot of people call you the most hated man in Israel. At what point did you say, okay, this is going to be my role?
There was never a moment like this. It was gradual. Like I also changed my views throughout the years. The more I went there, the more radical I became. I separated from the idea of two-state solution. I separate from Zionism. But it took many years. It's a process. It's not a one-day decision. It's not like I went to sleep and woke up in the morning and said, oh, let's give up on Zionism. No, it's a process. And it's still going on. In terms of me, what I feel personally, it's not very pleasant, especially not in the last year, because most of my friends changed in this year, and I'm more lonely than ever, ideologically, not socially, but ideologically. I feel that there is really no market for my stories and my views, and there are very few partners.
I mean, I think that feeling is something that a lot of people are going through, particularly with friend circles, even family members, people I speak to. And so I mean, I don't know how much weight it carries, but I do want you to know that your views ideologically do have a lot of followers.
Thank you, but it's hard to tell it from within Israel.
Yeah.
From within Israel, it's very hard to tell it. From outside, I know it and I appreciate it, and it really encourages me a lot. But by the end of the day, my first goal, at least originally, was the Israeli public opinion. And here, it's a total failure, obviously.
It's not easy to be the critic. What is it that keeps you going?
Nothing romantic, only the fact that there is no other choice. I believe in what I do. I couldn't do anything else. And this is what I'm doing for 35 years now. And there's no reason in the world to stop it. On the contrary, there are so many reasons to continue it because of the loneliness, because of the lack of any kind of tolerance to hear those things. This just fuels me to go on because, by the end of the day, someone has to tell this story, even for the foreign, even for the English readers, for the English-speaking readers. So I've no doubt that I will continue as long as I can. I don't know for how long it will be possible. It's very hard to tell. If it's not Haaretz, I couldn't do it.
I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samira. It was a pleasure.